Hey, what's up? Thanks for the comment. Yes? So before I was so rudely interrupted, thanks for the comment. There's a couple other comments beneath that you and someone else made. It gives you an opportunity to explain wood movement to the general followers and population, people to better understand it. I'll explain that at the end, but here are the three things, a few things that I do to help prevent wood movement in a hardwood board door, for instance, this example. So fact of life, that wood's gonna move, but it does move in a predictable direction. I'll explain what that is here shortly. Radially, longitudinally, and tangentially to the growth rings or to the grain orientation for boards that are cut. So first and foremost is I use Quartersawn lumber, which helps align the tangential wood movement through the thickness of the board and not in a cupping direction. I'll explain that. We'll look at a board here in a little bit for those folks who want a little more depth. But wood movement in a board that's glued edge grain to edge grain, that's Quartersawn, is really more in the thickness and less so radially across the width. So you get a little bit less of the cupping potential. The other thing I do is use properly dried wood. So the wood that I have is kiln dried first of all, then it comes into my garage here and sits for a week. That is not climate controlled. Then it moves into here and sits for at least another week until it's at the appropriate relative humidity. One of the things that can prevent wood movement, especially snap wood movement where you get rapid cupping, is very quick changes in the relative humidity. So by allowing it to rest and acclimate the wood, I'm making sure that there's not a large difference between the wood itself and the ambient air. And this being a climate controlled space, it's going to be more likely close to the final place of where that piece of furniture will end up here in someone's home that likely will have at least heat, and air conditioning is not ubiquitous here in the Seattle area, and this piece was going locally. If this piece were going to somewhere else in the country, I'd have to be a little more thoughtful about how the door was built. The other thing I do is slow milling to be sure that as I expose more and more wood fibers to the air, the depth of the wood is likely going to be at a higher moisture content in the air. So if I mill up and take off a 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch out of some wood, then I've exposed a lot of new grain fibers, which then need to reacclimate. So I do a multi-step milling process. I mill down to about a little under 1/8 of an inch of final dimension, and then I let it rest again for at least 24 to 48 hours so that it can equilibrate with the atmosphere, and then I'll come back and mill down to final dimension so that the depth of the wood that the moisture is able to equilibrate is protected. Now, through the building process, you might have a little bit of wood movement because of just removing the material and things equilibrating with the atmosphere. But I found that sanding and planing and finishing that happens near the end removes such a small amount of material that there's not a large difference, or what they call an osmotic potential, between the air and inside the wood, that you don't get snap wood movement. And obviously, as we sand and plane to final pre-finishing, we're moving that last little bit. And then the third thing is a quality finish. So making sure that I like to use a hard wax oil because it's penetrative. It slows the movement of moisture between the atmosphere and the wood. And all those things together, I have quite strong confidence that a properly seasoned, dried, milled, and Quartersawn piece of wood is going to stay flat for longer. Now, that being said, I do warranty my pieces. So if the client ever said, hey, this door has moved a little bit and it doesn't look as nice, it's got a little bit of cupping in it, that's something I would fix. So I'm kind of taking on the risk for that as well, and I'm more confident taking on that risk because of the procedures of drying, milling, cutting, and making the panel for that door. So that's what I do, and what tends to work for me. And I think the other thing you can do, you could add battens to the back if you wanted to have a cross-grain sliding dovetail or something like that. That's certainly appropriate. I just haven't had that experience with it becoming an issue with the hardwood doors that I make. Now, again, I said if this were going somewhere else in the country where it would either be more difficult to repair that, or I had a higher, there's a little more risk of the wood moving. If it's going from here to like South Florida, we might preemptively put in those things like battens or some kind of stabilization, or even do a veneered panel. But I like to work with hardwood. And I think that's kind of what I've been successful in doing. But always, there are lots of ways to approach it and figure out what works for you in your situation per client, per piece, and what the best appropriate attachment is. So hope that helps. Do another video where I'll talk about grain and biology and wood movement.